Phil Winters for Dubs TV outside the Revenue Commissioner's Museum here in Dublin Castle on a wet, windy Wednesday morning up here in Dublin. Come along, it's free.
The basic idea behind the museum is to try and conserve and present to people the history of an extremely important Irish institution. No one likes paying taxes, but without the taxes revenue collects, we wouldn't have civilised society as we know it. You wouldn't have roads or schools or parks or hospitals. So we thought it was important, on the one hand, to conserve the history and to show that to people. And on the other hand, we wanted to take on an educational role and to make the connection between the taxes you pay and what revenue actually does for you. All the services that are provided on foot of the money that revenue collects. And then there's the other side of which people may not necessarily connect directly with revenue, and that's the customs function, which is more like the police. Revenue is present at all ports and airports in the country and in various other places. And we're policing imports and exports, making sure that drugs aren't hidden away, that arms aren't being imported. And a lot of people will be familiar with our customs dogs that were the stars of recent television series. We have a whole squadron of dogs and handlers, and they're working 24 hours a day, searching for drugs and other hidden contraband. So we wanted to try and present that in a coherent whole, in a nice, interesting location to the public. So in 2008, in March 2008, after about 3 or 4 years of preparatory work, we opened the museum, and so far it's proved very successful. We get about 30,000 visitors a year, which is an astonishing number.
That's lovely,
when you think that revenue wouldn't be the first thing you think of when you think of a museum. Taxes originally originated to pay for wars by various Irish chieftains, etc. So tax, like death, has been with us for a very long time. It can't be escaped. So there are documentary evidence going back to the time of St. Patrick of tribute being collected for kings, contributions being made to kings. This was to pay for war efforts between tribes. And then more later, as governments became more formalised and more structured, official mechanisms for collecting tax from around the country were put in place. So the Normans and later the British would have introduced formal taxation into Ireland, and that would have been collected obviously over the centuries from the middle 12th until the early 20th century, when the Irish Republic came into being. The system evolved over time, so it would have evolved from tributes such as giving cattle or crops to the king to eventually handing over money to the king's collector. Now, this would have been high-tech security in the 18th century. And it was probably used for collecting customs duties in a port. And the duties would have been stored in that and then probably delivered centrally on a regular basis, maybe once a week or once a month, on a wagon to the revenue authorities in Dublin Castle or in other parts of the country.
And how many of these would have been made?
There would have been thousands of them, because this was standard issue for the entire British Empire.
And it's cast iron, is it, or is it?
Yeah, it's a wooden one with a cladding of iron on it. Yeah, so it's not quite as heavy as it looks, although I certainly wouldn't be picking it up myself. My favourite exhibit in the museum, it's a sheet of paper, but I think it's a very interesting one. It's there.
This one, this finance.
Yeah, in fact, it's that one straight in front of you on the wall.
Oh, right.
That's the first set of revenue accounts, and it's for the period 1922 to the 31st of March 1923. That straddles the formation of the Irish Free State, because the Free State came into existence in December 1922. And in fact, Michael Collins was the first Minister for Finance at the start of that period in 1922, but by August 1922 he was dead. So he never saw the first set of accounts. And if you're looking close, it's £25 million was collected in the first year. Now,
what's that compared to today?
I did a bit. It's highly inaccurate science. This trying to bring it forward, but I worked it out on the back of an envelope to be about 3 billion. Now, when you think that we collect around 40 billion a year, you can see that the state was impoverished from a tax point of view. But of course, most people didn't pay any tax at all. they were highly resistant to it. And there wasn't a very highly developed middle class in Ireland. There was an ascendancy class, and there was you were either well off or you were poor.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a huge tax base to collect from. And indeed, just after the foundation of the state, it was very dangerous to be a tax collector, particularly if you went down south. You were likely to get shot. This is a sample book of what are called revenue stamps. Various legal instruments, like if you buy a house, the conveyance, a lease or a mortgage, revenue put a stamp on it. And now it wasn't a postage stamp or an adhesive stamp, it was actually an embossed stamp pressed on by a machine.
Okay.
And this is a test book of those stamps that was almost completely destroyed in the fire in the custom house. In fact, it's probably the only piece of paper that survived the fire, as far as we know. Now, this is a stamping machine, and as you can see, it has the look of Victoriana of it, and that's because basically these machines were built in the 19th century. Revenue used this up until the 1990s.
I see the padlocks on them.
That was to prevent staff other than assigned staff from using these machines, because this machine could impress stamps which could have enormous value. I was involved in a transaction at one stage in the mid-1980s where there was £5 million worth of stamp duty to be paid on a particular transaction. Okay? And that it was being paid by way of stamps impressed on a deed. So literally, we were putting £5 million worth of stamps on a deed. Wagons and carriages, tax on horses, tax on receipts. If you were sent to what was called at the time a lunatic asylum, the lunatic asylum issued your relatives with a piece of paper. There was a tax on that piece of paper. And then, of course, there was all your excise duties, any alcohol imported into the state, any tobacco imported into the state. Taxes on those. Some of those are still with us today. A lot of those are still with us today. That's the probate for Michael Collins. And as you can see, there are 3 revenue stamps on it.
That's his will, is it?
Yeah.
His last will and testament?
It's not actually his will, it's the probate document that was lodged in respect of his estate when he died. Revenue staff are responsible for monitoring the import and export of a whole range of items, shall we say, that relate to endangered species.
So obviously the wolf.
It's a wolf skin, yeah.
I got that. I don't understand what this is.
That little horse is covered in the skin of an ibex. An ibex is an endangered species. So that's a child's toy covered in the skin of an endangered species.
It just looks like a piece of wood.
Yeah, no, it's leather. That little bottle down there, that is a bottle of spirits with a baby cobra in it.
What?
A baby cobra, a snake.
Oh yeah, so it is, yeah.
Yeah. And cobras are endangered species. They're conch shells from the Philippines. They're an endangered species. All sorts of.
But if it's just the shell that's left, I mean that's.
Yeah, but they're
the animal's already dead.
No, they're taking them when they're alive and tearing the animal out of it and selling the shell because the shell is valuable. It's like ivory on an elephant. They kill the elephant to get the ivory. A lot of medicines get smuggled into the state, illegal medicines. People buying stuff on the internet. Now you've no idea what you're buying, none whatsoever. And there's on post at parcel depots around the country, and Revenue has a presence at these parcel depots. These are just some of the examples of what people use to smuggle in drugs.
You can buy those things in shops.
Yeah.
Those little grindy things. I've seen them in wholesale shops.
But if people are carrying pills or various potions in them, you're not allowed to bring them in. And some things are kind of obvious. Hollowed out books.
Right.
This is a carved wooden head that's actually hollow. We seized cocaine in that. These are parcels that, believe it or not, had been swallowed. We get all sorts of circumstances where people are trying to hide drugs that they're carrying, and you will get briefcases and suitcases, and the smell of perfume often will knock you sideways because the people think that if you drench something in perfume, the dog won't smell the cocaine or the marijuana inside it. But of course, the dog stratifies the smells. The dog will say, "Oh, that's perfume, and this is marijuana."
There's loads more down here, and I think it's worth coming down. It's free to come in.
Oh, absolutely free. Yeah, and 10 to 4.
10 to 4.
Yeah.
Is it 7 days a week?
5 days a week.
Thank you very much. Thanks.